Hello and welcome to this week's video tutorial in the iRacing Blancpain GT3 series for virtualracingschool.com. This time we are at the brilliant Suzuka circuit, certainly one of my favourites on the service, with its high speed, flowing nature and relentless corner sequences. With it being a figure of 8, it also has a very good balance of right and left-handers with a brilliant mixture of very technical, fast and slow corners. So I'm back in the Z4 for this one, a car which is well suited to Sector 1 through the long high-speed S's, but is badly handicapped out of the hairpin and final chicane, which require better traction and top speed. But overall it's certainly one of the more enjoyable circuits with the car, requiring good feel and balance. With regards to setup work this week, I've taken the spar setup and increased the rake slightly to so basically increase the rear ride height to reduce mid-corner understeer, but I've had to compensate for the extra entry oversteer that's caused with increased preload, so locking the diff more and moving the brake bias slightly forward. I've also increased tyre pressure slightly for grippier morning weather this week, and to improve grip in high-speed corners where the tyres have more load and downforce. The lap felt very good this week, and as ever is with the qualifying fuel in default weather, again it's in morning to match this week's official sessions. So as usual, I'll play the lap for you in full before our analysis. And across the line there, and that was a 1 minute 57.828. So we'll go back to the start of the lap now. Obviously it's a qualifying lap, so you want to make sure that you get a nice exit out of the last turn, to obviously give yourself as much straight line speed down the start finish straight as you can. So obviously heading into turn 1 now. Thinking about your braking point, which is going to be that access road on the left. I get a bit of oversteer here mid-corner, and then you have to exercise real patience to bring the car back for a good exit So we'll just go through that again in slow motion. So yeah, braking point is for me going to be this access road here on the left. You could use the 50 marker, but it's a bit further out in your periphery, because generally I'm looking at the apex at this point. So yeah, braking hard now, pretty much. I say hard, it's not actually that hard. It's quite well, you're turning in at this point already, so you don't want to brake so aggressively. So we just have a look at that. That's about 50%, and that's all I'm doing, because I'm already turning in quite hard. Make sure that you hit this early curb here. Just brush it. That's going to be your first apex, and then the speed that you've carried in. You want to carry lots of speed into here. Obviously, by not slowing the car down too much, it's going to cause you to run out and use all of the track in the middle of the corner. And I just got this is where you're most likely to get oversteer, pretty much as you're approaching this widest part of the corner, and that's because you're turning in quite aggressively and you're braking at the same time. So that's going to induce oversteer. And the way that I deal with that on this occasion is with a small dab of opposite lock, but also I breathe on the throttle at the same time as I'm braking. So we just have a look at that. So at this point here I get some oversteer, just breathing on the throttle, bit more throttle as well, just to kind of stabilize the car. And then at that point I'm being really patient. Now the reason that I do that is to effectively move the brake bias forwards dynamically. It's kind of a last resort really, because obviously it's going to burn fuel and it's not a very good technique for endurance racing, but it's quite necessary at times into this particular corner, because you need to carry so much entry speed to really nail the lap time. So once that's done, it's just a matter of being patient, like I said, and waiting for the car to sort of settle down. Just depending on how far wide or tight you are as you approach the next apex, you want to just be kind of playing with the brake or the throttle to bring it in or out, and then getting hard on the throttle for a good exit and opening the steering and using the track on the exit. No time to rest then, as immediately you're thinking about the next one, which is turn 2. Obviously I was looking for a name, but there isn't one, and you want to turn in fairly soon. Obviously you want to bring the car as you exit turn 1 over to the right, quite far, but then you want to aim for a fairly early turn in. So I'm already turning in now, and that's because it's such a high speed corner, and you want to take a nice tight line through it, so you're effectively straight lining this next sequence of S's as much as possible. This is actually turn 3, so I'm actually all the way on the curb on the left. I probably could actually use a bit more curb than that. Generally it's obviously risky because you're going so fast at this point, but yeah, you do want to keep the car as tight as you can as you run through here, so you can keep the speed up. And then through this whole sequence really, you're kind of just playing with the throttle and the brakes to modulate your line. You want to be obviously in the position where you're using all of the grip available, so your turn-in is kind of fixed, and you're just kind of adjusting your line with the pedal inputs. So as we come through the right-hander here, again you want to keep a nice tight lean here, so it's a slight bit of trail braking to bring it in tight. Hard on the throttle because I was probably just a little bit too slow at the apex, so I've had to kind of compensate by getting on the throttle a bit more aggressively. And then through here I've just got a bit too much speed at this point. I probably could have done with some trail braking right now, because as we'll see here, I'm running pretty wide, and we'll see there that I get quite close to the edge of the track. It wasn't too bad though, and then immediately I'm off the throttle again, just kind of playing with the car to keep my speed at a point where I'm hugging the inside line. Keep the car over to the right as much as possible into the uphill. This is now turn 7, so it's relentless, and yeah, just coming off the throttle as you approach the apex before getting back onto the throttle before. So let's just see that again. So very, very briefly was I at full throttle there. So yeah, aim for the rightmost part of the track to give yourself a wide line, because the goal here obviously is to get on the power as early as possible, so you can carry as much speed, exit speed up the hill as you can, because that's very critical. So yeah, I'm just lifting out the throttle fully now, waiting until the car's hooked up nicely for my apex, and then back to the throttle again, but not quite full throttle until now. Now I'm confident that I'm going to be able to commit to that full throttle without letting go again. So we just see, obviously, it's basically a game of how close you're willing to allow the car to run to the exit of the track here. So I could have maybe got on the power a fraction bit earlier, but obviously then I have no margin of safety. In practice laps, obviously I've overstepped the mark and I've ended up going onto the grass here and spinning. So you do want to have a margin of error depending on whether it's a qualifying lap or a race lap. So yeah, bringing the car nice and tight up the hill towards the first of the two Degners. Now there is a sort of patch on the tarmac here that I use as a reference, but if that's hard to see, there's this patch here. I'm actually using an Oculus Rift now, and I find it a bit easier to make this patch out actually than right now. It's not very clear for me right now on my monitor, but it seems to be about 75 meters. Pretty much you want to be getting on the brakes and turning in. This is pretty much about timing, the optimal timing really, to bring your speed down to the right amount. Here I'm apexing at about 170, and also avoiding turning in too soon or too late. If you turn in too early, you'll clip too much of this curb here, so that was about right. So I didn't actually get onto the upper part of the curb there, so the car was nice and settled. But if you turn in too late, you'll end up running wide here, and you'll get onto this really, really slippery AstroTurf, which will cause you all sorts of troubles because you need to get hard on the brakes again for Degner 2. So obviously on this occasion that was pretty much bang on. It wasn't like that on every lap, I promise you. And then the braking zone, that you don't really have any real reference for Degner 2. So it's just pretty much a matter of doing laps and letting your muscle memory sort of take into it, do that for you. Obviously you compensate on the next lap if you get it a bit wrong, and you kind of learn from each lap that you do, and then it becomes automatic really. So yeah, we're braking fairly hard, not too hard, because the circuit kind of drops away from you a bit into this camber here, so you can't afford to brake too hard, and then you've got to be surprisingly patient on the power as you get through here and exit, and you don't want to try and carry too much speed through here because you'll end up running wide again up here. So again, very much a timing corner. There's only one line through it, so it's a big contrast to the S's near the start of the lap, where you can sort of compensate mid-corner and adjust your line if you're a bit off. In the Degners you can't really do that. You pretty much, once you're on your line, you're pretty much committed to that line, and it's very much like, say, Brands Hatch in that regard. So yeah, that was quite nice for me. I just clipped the inside curb there very, very slightly. You don't want to get up onto this green stuff because it's going to upset the balance of the car, and it's obviously not in line with this camber at all. So you want to remain in the camber, avoid too much of that curb, and then hard-ish on the power. So it took me a while actually to get onto full throttle there. It was pretty much about 80-90% for a good while, until I was satisfied that I had the traction and that I was going to make the exit. Now you don't want to be running further wide than that on the exit here, because obviously there's AstroTurf again, very slippery, but also the car can bottom out over this curb as the car kind of straddles over the top. So then approaching the hairpin, you want to keep the car quite far over to the right, which means that you need to turn in quite early, under full power. Keep full power until the end of the curb on the right. Just after the curb ends on the right, you want to be braking hard. Now, obviously it's a very slow corner, you're coming in from high speed, so you can afford to brake hard in a straight line, almost at 100%, 85% there or so. Be patient, wait for the car's speed to come off, and the hairpin is cambered slightly, so if you do brake a bit too deep, you can compensate by slowing your apex down a bit and cutting back and making sure that you get good exit, because the exit is very, very important. So just being patient, waiting for the car to turn around and straighten up before getting on the power. So that was quite a tight line from me there. So obviously the speed that you're carrying through the right-hander sort of forces you towards the middle of the circuit into the hairpin, and then you want to make sure that you kind of get a tight line out, which will allow you to get on the throttle to full power nice and early. And when you get it right, you really feel the car sort of hook up and fire you out. So then through turn 12 isn't really a corner, it's just an acceleration zone. You keep the car nice and tight to the right, let it run out towards the middle of the circuit, just about here, before you then bring it back tight again as you approach the spoon curve, the first one. So the first one is going to be, and again there's another Marshall access road here on the right, so you want to spot that and brake just before there. So let's just have a look at that. Yeah, so braking just before there. It's a moderately hard braking zone, because you start turning in quite early, and the first of the spoon curves is quite shallow. So you want to come through here with a reasonable amount of speed. So I'm off the brakes now, just trail braking ever so slightly to arrest any understeer that I might get. You want to make sure that you hook up with this curb on the inside. Just be gentle with the car. If you're too aggressive, you will get oversteer mid-corner, in between the two apexes. Or the other problem is, if you carry too much speed, you'll end up running wide and getting onto this slippery AstroTurf again. And then you can just kind of, there's a short acceleration zone in between, where you can't quite get to full throttle. At least on this lap I didn't get to full throttle, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it, to be honest, because this was, as I said, quite a tidy, decent lap for me. And then you have to exercise a lot of patience through the second one. So off the throttle now, trail braking, waiting for the car to settle and keeping the car tight. I did actually get some oversteer here, if you just see there. So, right. It didn't seem like much, but there was a bit of scrubbing of speed, and that would have overheated my rears slightly. So we'll just see there, the car just yaws a bit more than I wanted, but it was okay because the front kind of washed out, and then it came back again and settled, and at that point I was able to get on the power. So notice how tight we are at this point, still in the corner. So it's a very long one. Keep it nice and tight here, and that'll allow you to commit to full throttle nice and early, because obviously the exit again is super important. Now it took me a while to get to full throttle there, and that's because you're cornering quite aggressively, you're traction limited. So you want to get hard on the throttle but not to full throttle, so about 80-90%, and a lot of the time you have to kind of open up the steering and anticipate oversteer as you exit, so as the circuit kind of drops away from you and down the hill, which is exactly what's happening right now. I'm counter steering ever so slightly, and you just see me kind of soaring at the wheel ever so slightly, just to keep the car in a straight line, and also opening as the circuit opens up. You want to use all of this curb on the exit. I say all of it, just allow your car to run onto the inner part. If you use too much of this curb, there is a nasty bump where it starts, and you also collect an incident, and it'll unsettle the car and ruin your momentum. So then obviously down to the long straights to 130R. Thinking about your braking zone, this again is another point and shoot corner where it's all about timing, and there's a 50 marker on the right there, which you'll want to brake just about at that point, but it's a very sharp and brief braking point, and then it's just a kind of a little flick to the left. Don't want to flick it too aggressively because you don't want to get any oversteer at this kind of speed. But make sure the most important thing is that you don't turn in too late, because you want to just clip this curb on the inside, and if you do turn in too late, you'll quickly run out of circuit and you'll end up on this AstroTurf on the exit, which is horrible because the car is generally in a slightly yawed condition at this point, and normally the rear tyre is the one that's most heavily loaded, and that's the one which is most likely to give, and it will give very, very quickly, and you'll be in all sorts of trouble. So obviously you want to avoid that. If you need a lift on the exit, that's okay, ideally not though. And then to finish off the lap, bringing the car back over to the left, obviously keeping your steering into one smooth motion, and then you have a brake marker here on the left, and you want to brake before there, so it's about 120 meters or so. And it's the hardest braking zone on the whole circuit. Car's really loaded up at this point with downforce, so I'm braking 100%, and then just kind of gradually bleeding out of that as I approach the first part of the chicane. So I'm just bleeding off the brakes now, just starting to turn in now, just sort of breathing over the throttle and brake now, just to modulate my line. Now the amount of curb that you want here is pretty much this. If you have more curb than this, you'll get an instant, and if you have less curb than this, then you are essentially giving up potential time. So just keep the car speed down, don't go too aggressive at this point, just a little bit of throttle in between, before then bringing the car over to the left again quickly, and making sure that you hook up again with the curb on the left, but a little bit less so than the first curb. You don't want to get over on this green stuff this time, and then basically aiming for a nice tight straight exit, so you don't want to turn in too early. Basically you want to leave your turn-in point so that you get a nice tight exit, which is going to allow you to get hard on the throttle nice and early. Now I am actually at full throttle, but then now I'm lifting, so let's just have a look at that. So I get to full throttle, but then as the revs come into the power band and I get a bit more power, and the circuit's also turning to the right at this point, I'm also going over the curb on the right, so just breathe out of the throttle just to reduce the risk of wheel spin and oversteer, before then getting back on the throttle to full throttle and keeping the car right, going up through the gears. Obviously you don't want to go over to the right before you've got traction, so wait for the car to settle and then aim for a nice tight exit over the finish line. And that completes our analysis at Suzuka circuit in the BMW Z4 GT3. If you aren't aware by now, you can find qualifying and race setups, telemetry and replays over at virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-to-one tuition with myself and top drivers from the likes of Coanda Simsport. So good luck this week, and thanks for watching.